Hey Ghostbuster fans, welcome back to the Spectra Creative Channel with me, your host, Scott ToyGuru Neitlich. I'm doing a follow-up video on Mattel's Ghostbuster Prop Replicas. You can see a link to the original video here, and honestly, I kind of thought I covered everything in that video, but I get more questions about the props than almost anything, and so I thought I'd just kind of compile all of those questions and do a follow-up. Why? Well, first off, I'm a huge Ghostbuster fan. Ghostbusters is absolutely one of my top properties I personally love. So when Mattel and Sony etched out a deal to do Ghostbuster toys, one of the first things I did was say, can we add prop replicas to that license? And Sony agreed. They loved the idea. Sony was one of the best partners I ever got to work with, and they were so supportive over the idea of us doing prop replicas because outside of the Kenner roleplay toys for kids, adult prop replicas hadn't really been done. So let's go through them. As I discussed last time, the first one we did was the PKE meter. And this was mainly because when we polled Ghostbuster fans and went to some of the fan sites, we were told over and over again that this was the hardest one for fans to make. I've gotten feedback from people saying, no, that's not true, it was easy to make, and maybe that's so. But either way, we made one. So, hey, what are you going to do? That's why we started with the PK meter. Plus, we also wanted one that was a little lower in cost, as opposed to, going out with, say, a full proton pack. And presentation was everything, which is why they came with these awesome boxes with peanuts in them and everything, like Venkman was shipping them out the back door of the firehouse. So one of the questions that comes up a ton is how we did the effect so that the PK meter worked for both movie 1 and movie 2. Because on close analysis, if you watch the movies, which if you're seeing this YouTube video, you've probably seen Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters 2, and maybe even some of the female 2016 movie, and played the video game. You're a Ghostbuster fan, obviously. So looking at the two movies, there is a difference between the way the video effect on the screen works, whether it goes left to right to left, as well as how high and low the peaks and valleys are of the that little light up going up and down the screen. Now, one of the issues is there are actually relatively few shots in the movies of the screen from the front. For the most part, you're seeing it from the back because that's kind of how Egon tends to use it. And, when he's waving it around looking for ghosts, you're looking at the back of the PK meter. But we went through the movies. We combed through them, sometimes shot by shot, doing freeze frames. And, we also looked at a lot of fan sites. Luckily, Ghostbusters is a very, very popular franchise, and fans have kind of already dissected a lot of this. And for all the prop replicas really, we spent a lot of times looking at fan sites that had already dissected the props and shown what they were supposed to do, and little differences like how the PK meter worked between movie 1 and movie 2. And we couldn't have done it without those fan sites and fans sort of pre-doing our research for us. Luckily, the internet exists, and we had access to this information. We also looked at a lot of behind-the-scenes photos. I ordered a Ghostbuster making-of book off eBay from like '84. And Sony, again, being the amazing partner, they allowed us to go through their sound effect library and try to see if we could secure as many actual authentic sounds for the different props from their archive. Unfortunately, not every prop had those. The PK meter is one that didn't have every sound, so we had to kind of recreate those. But we did, we basically did our best to get it as close as possible. And with a little flick of the switch in the middle there, you could go between Ghostbuster 1 mode and Ghostbuster 2, and on the back was a knob for the arms. Okay, next up, the Ghost Trap. I think this is personally my favorite of all of the prop replicas we did, and more work was put into this one probably than any of them. Much like the PK, you could switch it for movie 1 or 2, but that was simply by moving those little red bars on the side with the gray bars. They just snapped on and off, so you could either make it with the red bars from one movie or the gray bars from the other movie. Much easier than with the PK meter. And not only was there electronic features, but there were just sort of, I guess you could say, play features. There were knobs that did nothing, that were just there to be knobs, but you could turn them, but they didn't actually affect anything. Now, in the movie, obviously the trap had this ginormous payoff where it shot out, lightning and energy and ghost trapping stuff. And we really wanted to try to figure out a way we could do this. And to say we explored every option is an understatement. We looked at so many different ways of getting smoke and getting, light effects to shoot up in the air, everything from even streamers to, we looked at smoke guns to see, like there were liquid smoke pellets that, we even thought about, do we sell those and then we can sell refills. We looked at sleight of hand magic, and we actually talked to magicians, and tried to figure out ways that we could kind of incorporate this concept of hand smoke into the traps, and that when it opened, smoke came out and it actually hissed, and to be more realistic to the movie. In the end, while we had an exhaustive search, and by we I mostly mean Carl, who was the engineer on this, and he was amazing. He did so many experiments to try to get this to work, and to say Carl was a huge Ghostbuster fan and puts me to shame is an understatement, because Carl knew these movies and wanted to do these props so badly, and I'm so glad we had him working on them, because he really is the one who made this happen. Unfortunately, the smoke just wasn't working. It just, it didn't look right. It wasn't worth it, and the cost was making it crazy expensive, so we had to kind of back out of that and just have a light-up effect. But Carl, being the, again, amazing designer he is, not only did he have a light up, but he had a shaking effect, and he had different sounds that would come up. Some were on a rotation of, I think, like 100 or 150. So there were certain sounds that only came up once every, like 100 times you played with it. That was, kind of Carl's way of doing Easter eggs and just making it really cool. All right. Last thing on the trap was my personal favorite, was that after it closed and caught the ghost, you could actually remove the trap from the trap base, and it would still make that blinking noise that said the trap was full. And then you could strap it right on your belt, and you had a trap to go. I loved that it had this feature. It just made it so much fun. This was a great toy to work on, and honestly, it was an honor to work on it. All right, next up we have the Ghostbuster Goggles, or Ray's goggles, really. He was the only one who used them on screen, and they were kind of the ecto goggles that would show where ghosts were, or let him peek through walls, or who knows. They never really actually explained what they did. He just kind of puts them on his head in the movie. And we revealed this at San Diego Comic-Con along with the, I think, reissue of the PKE meter, which, unfortunately, for amazing as how high it goes on eBay now, the reissue just didn't sell. It was a big reason we didn't reissue a lot of things, because if you couldn't resell the PKE meter, how in the world were you going to resell the other ones? So the goggles were the only prop replica that came with a sticker sheet for you to apply the stickers yourself. And part of this was a cost-saving maneuver, but it was also because in different shots, it looks completely different. So we wanted fans to be able to customize it to how they wanted. And when you strapped them to your head and turned them on, inside you would see Slimer coming at you with screaming sounds. You can kind of see it there through the goggles the photo of it. It was a projection, an internal projection between two pieces of plastic and glass that allowed it to work. And it animated a little bit. It flew at you, and there were a few different versions of it flying at you. Now, we didn't actually, or rather we weren't able to use film footage. We tried that out, and it just wasn't working because it was too difficult to isolate Slimer. And we really basically took a cue from how they pulled Slimer off physically in the first movie, that they used a giant puppet. And so using this technique, we basically did the same thing, but instead of doing a giant puppet, we used a little one. We actually used this one. We used the Slimer that came with the first Egon figure. We actually used the Mattel toy. So what you're seeing flying at you is the Mattel action figure of Slimer, which is kind of cool. Now, one thing is if you have the PK meter and the goggles and you use them together, the goggles will note that the PK meter is on and beeping. It's programmed to recognize that sound. So if you have the PK meter going and you attach the little device to the bottom, you will see a bonus ghost. You'll see the library ghost that you can't see unless you have the PKE meter going. And again, a little Easter egg that Carl threw in because, again, Carl's amazing. And it was done the same way as Slimer, where we couldn't isolate the film footage, so we did a puppet, and by puppet I mean we used the action figure. So we had our ghost librarian figure that, again, came with Egon. Egon gets all the cool ghosts as pack-ins, and so we just used her in the footage. All right, rounding out the prop replicas is the neutrino wand, which I think I kept calling the proton wand in the first video, and boy, do Ghostbuster fans like to point out that I was wrong, and I'll be the first to admit it. It's a neutrino wand. It's even what we called it. It's like I can't even remember the SKU name. This thing was amazing, and I think one of the things that made it really great was the sound effects. Unlike the PK meter, we actually had the film accurate effects that Sony was able to locate. And again, great partners. They wanted us to make this the best possible, and we couldn't have done that without all their help. And we even had multiple, like all the different ons. So you switched 1, 2, 3, 4 ways to turn it on. And there's even a meter that corresponded. A lot of fans didn't even, it was sort of an Easter egg bonus effect that you really had to be a fan of the movie to notice. The other big thing on the wand was if you look at the tip on the back of it, you will see that there is a hole. It's actually a standard guitar jack, if you will. So if you have like an electric guitar, the jack would fit right into that hole. It was done that way deliberately, purposefully, because let me show you another shot of it. There's actually, so this is mine. I'm holding it up. And so, God, you think if I'm taking my own picture, it'd be less blurry. I'm obviously not a good photographer. But yeah, there you can see the jack at the tail end of the wand. Now, why did we do this? Well, much like with the goggles and the PK meter, we wanted our prop replicas to work together. And it was always our hope that one day we would be able to do a full proton pack and that the wand would attach to it. Doing the wand separately was also a cost-saving maneuver because the proton pack was going to be really expensive to do. But we wanted to work ahead. We wanted to think about that. And the idea was by plugging into the neutrino wand, the sounds would then come out of the proton pack, out of a speaker. One of the reasons we didn't get to do this is, for the most part, Mattel's factories make plastic toys, like you just saw on that assembly line. And the proton pack is not only extremely detailed and difficult, it's made of metal. It's not made of plastic. And our vendors, honestly, were not set up to do this type of thing. When we did the prop replicas, we actually had to find new vendors, which is a expensive process and a difficult process because Mattel likes to use their standard vendors because they also know from a safety and ethical standpoint, those vendors meet all of Mattel's expectations. We did review a proton pack heavily, and it kind of came down to doing a proton pack or doing Castle Grayskull at one point. We had a slot for a very expensive high-end item. And the reason that we went with Castle Grayskull in the Masters of the Universe Classics line was twofold. The first being that, as I said, it was made of plastic. And that's what Mattel works in. It works in plastic, for the most part, outside of, those little zinc cars in that line called Hot Wheels. And also because, Motu was Mattel's intellectual property from a certain point of view. You can see the Who Owns Motu video for more about that. And so that's also, made more sense to do something that we had ownership of because it would be logistically easier. Now, when I left Mattel in late 2014, the 2016 line was already heavily planned out. And we did have a lot of discussion about bringing the proton pack back, especially because this was going to be a movie year for Ghostbusters. But I think once it looked like it wasn't going to be the old proton pack, it was going to be a new proton pack for the new reimagined female Ghostbuster team, those plans kind of dissolved away and the new team kind of didn't pick up the ball with it. So that's the other reason the proton pack didn't happen, because it wasn't in the new movie. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it answered all the remaining questions about the prop replicas, but if there's more, leave them in the comments. I could always do a part 3. All right. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video and you want to see more on Ghostbusters and other action figure lines, subscribe, ring the bell, give me a like, because that tells YouTube to share this with more people, and that's the goal of this, is to share love and knowledge of toys. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you for the next time.